From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. "10 years ago, it felt like the global spotlight shifted to one city. Heads of state and world leaders, film stars and philanthropists flocked to be there. Everything was about Paris, and a climate agreement so starry, it needed Leonardo DiCaprio to announce it.
Yes, we have achieved the Paris Agreement. More countries have come together here to sign this agreement today than for any other cause in the history of humankind, and that is reason for hope.
The Paris Agreement tied nearly every country to a commitment aiming to limit global temperatures rising above 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial levels. To celebrate, all the assembled world leaders queued up for what must be the biggest class photo in the history of summits. A beaming David Cameron stands on the back row next to Prince Charles as he was then. President Obama, Angela Merkel, it's a roll call of global power. A decade later, it's a very different picture.
Only a handful of the world's most powerful heads of state made the trip to Brazil for COP30.
The world is not on track to meet its targets.
But I'm immediately withdrawing from the unfair one-sided Paris Climate Accord ripoff.
Leaders of big emitting countries like India, Russia, and China were no-shows.
Is the dream of limiting global warming over? We've pinned down the UK's Special Representative on Climate to find out where we stand. The story today, COP30. Can the world get back on track? We have spoken to you on the podcast before. Last time it was just before Glasgow, but it's been a while. A lot has changed, including your job title. So would you mind just introducing yourself to our listeners and maybe just painting a picture of where you are?
Yes, so hello, my name is Rachel Kyte. I am the UK's Special Representative on Climate, which means that I work for the Foreign Secretary and the Secretary for Energy Security and Net Zero, trying to put climate and nature at the heart of our foreign policy. And I'm speaking to you today from the UK delegation office in the bowels of an enormous aircraft hangar-like tent in an industrial zone in Belém. And Belém is on the Amazon River mouth. It's about 32 degrees with 92% humidity, so we're all a bit sticky.
Well, we'll try and make allowances for that. Rachel, you're there at COP in Brazil. What has the conference been like so far? I mean, what are the stories you're going to go home and tell?
So President Lula said that he wanted to host this COP, this meeting of 195 countries in Belém. And he made that announcement about sort of 3 years ago, really. And ever since then, the symbolism of meeting in the Amazon is really significant. You actually feel it when you're here, right? If we lose this tropical forest basin, which covers about 8 countries, we will feel it globally. It affects weather patterns and rainfall, in a large part of the world, which is where all those soybeans and other things that we rely upon for food and for pet food and everything else, it's where it all comes from. So it would be very destabilizing if this forest system becomes any more impacted than it already is. So he brought us all here. He also organized a meeting of leaders, which was in advance of the negotiations.
Colleagues and friends, 10 years ago, the world came together in Paris, united in our determination to tackle the climate crisis.
He invited people here to make a world leaders statement on working together to save the Amazon.
The Amazon rainforest helps to regulate the climate for every person on Earth, and it reminds us that this is a truly collective endeavour.
So that happened at the end of last week, and that's what Keir Starmer came to. Now we're into the negotiations. So imagine There's about 50,000 people apparently in this city, which isn't that big. And that's, indigenous peoples from all over the world, NGOs from all over the world, and then the negotiators, government officials, and a lot of business people as well. And what we're thrashing through is, how do we actually transition away from fossil fuels, something that we agreed to 2 years ago? So what's the roadmap for that? How do we protect the forests? How do we invest in nature? How do we make this all equitable? And how do we speed up the transitions in big industry that uses a lot of power? So it's actually a very practical agenda, although it's difficult to follow if you're just a member of the public because it's all done in arcane negotiated language.
That's the great aim of this COP. That's what it's been set up to do. But there's clearly been a real shift on the global stage. This is a COP where there is no US leader arriving. The biggest economy in the world, one of the biggest polluters, isn't there. The leaders of China and India, they're not there either. How different does it feel? And how possible is it to make meaningful change without them there?
Yeah, so the ever-present but not present force is the United States. They're not here. They have decried the Paris Agreement. And at the United Nations General Assembly, the President of the United States sort of attacked the whole enterprise of multilateral discussions on climate as being a con. That language has sat very, very ill with almost all countries. But for the 194 countries who are here, we're kind of just sort of getting on with it. Obviously, the United States is a large part of emissions, and it matters to the world that their emissions come down. And under President Trump's plans, they won't come down as fast as they need to. So we have to sort of grin and bear that. But there's all the things that we need to do because we're past the tipping point. Every other country is trying to get to net zero. Every other country is trying to move to clean energy. And just because the United States isn't, doesn't mean that they're changing their targets. I would also differentiate between the United States and China and India. Both China and India have had head of government level significant bilateral summits with Brazil this year, where they talked a lot about climate and a lot about clean energy and forest conservation, all the rest of it. And they signaled that they wouldn't make 2 journeys to Brazil in 1 year. And so they're represented at a very senior level here, and they have real negotiating authority. So the US is absent by choice. China and India didn't send their heads of state to the Leaders Summit, but they're here with very high-level delegations and fully engaged in the negotiations. So it really is 194 versus 1.
Rachel, the great achievement at COP in Paris a decade ago was the commitment to limiting the rise of global average temperatures to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. That was the Paris Agreement, which Donald Trump has now pulled out of. Let's be frank, is that dream now dead?
No. How we get there, we're going to have to adjust because we're not on track. So imagine that you've set a goal. You said you were going to lose 2 stone by Easter, right? And you're clearly not on track to lose 2 stone by Easter. You still need to lose 2 stone. We're not moving the target of Easter. So how do we do this? We're discussing here all the things that we could do to make it more likely that we would lose 2 stone by Easter. There are things that we could do that we're not doing. There are things that we agreed to do that we're not doing. And so most of the conversation here is about, okay, let's double down on the things that we know that work, that we aren't doing enough, and let's help the countries that can't do it to do it. And then the question is, well, maybe we're going to miss the Easter deadline, but we're going to come back we are going to lose 2 stone. It's just going to be, before the May bank holiday or something like that. We may overshoot. This is the word that people use, which is that we will go above 1 degree of warming, but we will come back down to it as these energy transitions start kicking in. So we already have, China indicating that it's peaking in terms of its emissions. So they're coming down. The problem is that we're talking about weaning ourselves off fossil fuels and turning our economies into electrostates, right, where they're running on clean energy. And that has gone faster in some parts of the world than others. And we need to find the finance to help the countries that haven't made that journey yet to make it more quickly. But nobody's sort of saying, oh, well, I'm not going to lose 2 stone. I'm just going to go on being morbidly obese, right? We've just got to find the ways to do it, and we've got to find the deadline to do it.
Well, I mean, if we're using that analogy,
I'm sorry, it's a bad one.
does that mean... No, we'll keep going. Is it the deadline that you think will now shift? You know, is it a timescale thing in terms of getting to net zero that is shifting, or is it that you're expecting everyone else to do so much more to make up for the fact that America, the second largest emitter in the world, isn't a part of this anymore?
No, so I think the overall goal is net zero by 2050, 1.5 by the end of the century. And it's graduated, right? So some countries have said that they will reach net zero by 2060 or by 2070 in the case of India, because they have to develop and grow, right? India will be the only country on earth that has completely developed in a green economy. No other country's ever done that. You know, and then for countries like us, we've said 2050, some countries have said 2040. So that's the average. I think that that's still achievable, because if we really power through in the energy transitions, then the sort of S-curves of innovation, how fast these transitions actually can go. Look at China, look at renewable energy in India already, look at Morocco, look at some of the countries in the Gulf, look at Chile. There are parts of countries' economies which have rapidly transitioned. And in fact, the UK, we have delinked our growth from emissions. We have moved from a coal-based economy 25, 30 years ago to now an economy with a cleaner energy mix, with a goal to get to a completely clean energy mix by 2030. So I think that this actually could go very fast. There are things that might slow us down, making sure we've got all of the component parts for renewable energy, making sure that we move the electric vehicle transition as quickly as possible, not just in cars that you or I might drive, but on light buses and multiple people taxis that most people in the developing world move around on. You know, big buses in big cities like Sao Paulo and Mexico City and things like that. If that continues to become electrified, working off clean energy, you'll start to see this pick up. And we now know that we can decarbonize shipping. We can decarbonise steel, we can decarbonise cement. We know how to do it. We've just now got to build the trade and investment criteria that will make that's more desirable to do than the old way of doing it. One area which will be really difficult, and we'll see this over the next 10 years, is aviation. We still don't have today a way to decarbonise aviation.
But with America working in the opposite direction, is that still for our economies to change?
I mean, it definitely slows things down, and it's added a complication because it's integrated into the tariff battles that are going on. And we've seen a very aggressive diplomacy coming out of the United States against the Paris Agreement. But, you know, most countries are trying to deliver for their own people. And a lot of countries sort of look at the United States, and it's very, very clear that the direction of travel for our energy mix for the future is going to be renewables and nuclear and carbon capture and storage, where we're using gas and things like that. So a clean energy mix. And so if the United States wants to reverse that sort of race towards clean energy for its own people, that's going to mean that Americans will have energy price inflation. They will have more expensive energy, and they're going to have less reliable energy. And so a lot of countries are sort of saying, well, you know, if the United States wants to take itself out of this race, the American people will lose. There's two things going on. One is installing renewable energy, and there we see the Chinese moving at an enormous pace, but also Europe, us, and many, many, many countries around the world, right? That's the direction of travel for everybody. And then it's what you do with all of that renewable energy, where you become electrified. You electrify your cars, your houses, you know, all of your industrial processes, etc. And that's where you start to get really exponential growth, and where you get exponential increase in pace to achieve net zero. If you don't have that renewable energy to run your economy off, so you can't become electrified, the gap between the leaders and the laggards is going to get bigger. And that's where the United States will really suffer, because American car makers are making cars that run on gas, as they call it, or petrol. The rest of the world is perfecting electric vehicles. So you lose market share, etc. So I think that most of the world is sort of looking at the United States saying this is a remarkable self-inflicted wound.
For you, as somebody who's there to negotiate at this COP, in the past, Britain would have been there with America, a special relationship, there backing it. It would have been there as part of the European Union. With so many of our old alliances looking a bit shaky, is it quite lonely? I mean, do you feel like the UK's a bit on its own there?
So we're not part of those blocks, but we're completely aligned, I would say. And so actually the reality of our situation now is that we were always a bridge builder, right? The relationship with the US, the relationship with the EU, inside the EU or outside, our relationship with the Commonwealth, our relationship with, other middle-income countries. And so we're consistently asked to play a bridge-building role. So we have an extraordinarily interesting technical partnership with China on clean energy and climate. I mean, I was just there 2 weeks ago, rubber stamping some of the technical work that we're doing together, where they're learning from us and we're learning from them. So we have a basis for a conversation with them, which is different than the EU, right? Also with Saudi Arabia, where we have, we may agree to disagree on some things, but we also have technical partnerships, for example, on bringing clean cooking to Africa. So I think that in some ways, if we play our hand well and we see the world as it really is, where there's more South-South trade now than there is North-North trade and things like that, if we understand the world and understand our place in it, then I think we can be a very useful broker and a very useful bridge builder.
Rachel, you've sort of explained how there are benefits in terms of moving transition towards a greener economy, long-term benefits. We're still very committed to our goals in the UK. A lot of people listening, though, will be wondering whether it's really worth us sticking to them when other countries, like America, are abandoning theirs. Are we sort of handicapping ourselves in terms of our economy in order to meet goals that others don't seem to see as seriously as we do?
So I understand where that fear comes from, but the United States is the only one that's abandoning its goals. Nobody else is. People sort of tend to also think that China is not doing enough. China has just put forward a plan which is economy-wide, all warming gases, so not just carbon dioxide. And we hope that they over-deliver and that they've under-promised, because they can go much faster than that. But they have issues of the connectivity of a grid that they're building out over this vast country that would then run on renewable energy. And they're talking to us about how we've managed our power market to get examples that they can use for how they're going to do theirs. So I want to reassure people that everybody's trying to do this. It is hard. Everybody's journey is different, and everybody is sort of comparing notes and working together to try to do this. I mean, we've just had a series of events where we've been helping the Brazilian industries, heavy industries, on how to transition more quickly based on what British industry has done and what British regulation does. So everybody's still in, it's hard, and this is the only way that we will get clean water, affordable electricity, clean air to British people. And then we have to work at home on our own adaptation to climate impacts, right? Which is flood defences, how to make sure that extreme heat is not unbearable. But if 99% of the emissions come from outside the UK, the only way for us to be safe is if those 99% of emissions come down quickly.
We are hearing a lot of pressure domestically, though. I mean, if you look at the political spectrum, you've got Reform and the Tories abandoning net zero targets. Even the Tony Blair Institute, which is a different part of the political spectrum, saying that we should slow down. We need to change our timelines because it's too big a hit on the economy. Is that something the government is considering?
No, I don't think so. The government was elected on a mandate and is pursuing it. And I think if you look at the makeup of Parliament as a whole, and you add up the Parliamentary Labour Party, the Greens, the Lib Dems, Plaid, SNP, whatever, that's much, much larger chunk than the rump of the Tory party and the few Reform seats. And obviously the polling would indicate that, Reform is very strong. But I think we need to look at why people are attracted by Reform. And, some of the data that I've seen is that, people want clean air, they want clean water, they want affordable electricity, they want the benefits that come from that. And if we can deliver that, I think that's the most important thing. The most important thing is that people can feel in their wallet and in their daily lives that a cleaner energy system and a safer world works for them. So that's what we're trying to deliver.
Is the message that connects that with a greener economy just not being transmitted strongly enough? Is that the problem?
Yeah, I think we could do much more to get into the public marketplace and have at it, right? Because, this idea that net zero is going to bankrupt the economy, I haven't seen a single shred of evidence to support that. And there's a lot of jobs that are going to come with this green economy, right? There's a lot of jobs that comes with interconnection, a lot of jobs that comes with carbon capture and storage. There's a lot of jobs that comes out with the build renewables. They pay better than the old jobs. And we've got young people who need to be trained for this new economy. You know, when I travel around the world, people are asking the UK for advice on how to make their transitions. They're also looking for the investable opportunities in the UK because it's clear that we're going in one direction. And so that provides certainty for investors. So I understand why people are concerned because life will be different going forward. But, you know, I want my mother to be able to be in a cool medical ward in a hospital. I don't want her to be in hospital suffering because we're having an extreme heat event. You know, I want flood defences along the River Severn where my family is scattered. You know, we can do this.
We talked earlier about America and their resistance to the Paris Agreement. They've pulled out now. It's not just that they're not keeping up to the promises that they made earlier. It's that they seem to be going in the opposite direction. You know, slogans like drill, baby, drill. Given that government policy in this country seems to be about trying to keep America and Donald Trump on side, how difficult is it to sell America the message on the environment? Are those conversations even happening?
Well, in any relationship, right, you have things you agree on, things you disagree on. The trick is to disagree agreeably, right, as somebody famous once said. So we have a detailed conversation with the US on nuclear power and nuclear power technologies. We have detailed conversations with the US on energy issues at the technical level and at the political level. I mean, their energy secretaries met with Ed Miliband, and, you know, this is part of a broader conversation. But we disagree with the current administration on the value of climate action now. We think this is better for British people. We think it's going to be more affordable for British people, and it builds our energy security. I mean, we're sitting as an island in the North Sea and the Atlantic, you know, off the coast of Europe, and we were buffeted by the energy price spikes after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we can disagree agreeably. I think the agreeably is really important because we're part of a multilateral system, and we believe in that multilateral system as well. We don't believe that we can find solutions to these problems on our own. So I think we disagree with the United States with sort of the attacks on the United Nations system and on why we all sit around a table together, however hard it is and however hot and humid it is in Belém. There's a value to this. And we disagree respectfully on what we think is best for the energy economy of the UK. There are other things where we work well together. There are other things, obviously, where we have differences across the rest of the economy, across security, across culture, across all kinds of issues. So, you know, this government was elected to do what was best for British people, and that's what we're trying to do.
China is still the world's biggest polluter, but it has also recently become a huge exporter of green technology. At a time where America is abandoning its targets, does it feel like China is now almost leading the charge rather than America? And how do you, as the UK's representative, balance that relationship between America and China and not being seen to be too close to one or the other?
Yeah, so the thing to understand about China is that because of the size of its economy and because of its determination to clean its economy going back 20 years, right, they have this huge throughput effect, right? They've pulled the global economy along. So, you know, they're producing more than 90% of all of the sort of solar panels in the world. They're producing more than 70% of the components of the wind energy industry. And the size of their market has really revolutionized the move for renewable energy. And we have to recognize that, and we have to applaud it. Now, does it come with downsides? Yes, and we have a complicated relationship with China. We agree on some things, we disagree on others vehemently, and we, you know, it's a tense relationship at times, and it's a productive one at others. The same as the United States. So yes, the point of the UK is that we should be in the middle, maintaining productive relationships for Britain with both. And also, I think the other sort of leg on the stool is the European Union. And so we are a satellite amongst all three. And the trick of this is to maintain productive, focused relationships on the things which matter to us with all three. And there is no bilateral relationship, a relationship between two countries anymore that doesn't have clean energy and climate and nature at the heart of it. I mean, you look at the strategic partnership we signed with India this year, which was a real breakthrough, huge cooperation on these issues in the middle of it. Conversations with Indonesia, we're signing a strategic partnership with them. Huge focus on this. And with Brazil, huge. So this is the nature of the future of the global economy and the only way that we can arrive at a sort of a more peaceful world as well.
We've talked about the UK taking a real leadership role when it comes to climate and when it comes to COP. As part of that, we did help Brazil, your hosts, to set up their Tropical Forests Forever facility, a fund to save the world's rainforests. We were sort of spearheading the entire movement, and now we've decided we're not going to contribute, we're not paying into it. Given that, doesn't it become much harder to convince other countries to give money when we're not? And why aren't we?
So it's true that for the last couple of years, the UK has been providing technical assistance to the Brazilians as they've thought through this idea that they had. And because we have the City of London as sort of this sort of crown jewel in terms of global investment, we've been able to help the Brazilians sort of take the temperature of the capital markets on what would they think would be a right kind of fund design, etc. And we've also helped the Brazilians negotiate with the World Bank, who are going to provide sort of the back office functions of this fund. And then there's timing, right? So when the decision was made to move the budget to like the week after COP, that's become difficult within government. And so the discussions between President Lula and Prime Minister Starmer here were not now. It wasn't no, never. And so, once the budget's gone and the government sort of reconvenes sort of after that, which is obviously the focus of a lot of activity at the moment, then we'll take a fresh look. But you're right, the way to crowd private money in is by a sovereign like the UK putting money down, which helps the rating agencies understand what the fund is. We're a quality investor. That would send a signal to the market. We're well aware of that.
For you, what would a successful COP look like? What do you sort of need to see in the final text for this to have actually been a meaningful summit?
We would like to see a mobilisation of investment in nature beyond just the TFFF, right? We're in the Amazon. We have to show that we're absolutely serious about what we discussed in Glasgow 4 years ago, which was to halt deforestation and to really see a massive investment in forests across the world. I'd like to see the signals around carbon markets of all kinds really very strongly, because if the forests are managed well and we manage the carbon markets well, that's a big revenue source into developing countries now so that they can invest in their own adaptation. And then I'd like to see some guardrails and some rules around how we transition away from fossil fuels. So 2 years ago, remarkably to the world's public, right, we actually agreed that fossil fuels were part of the problem. We'd never been able to say that before, even though everybody knew it. But we never said how you transition away. And I think if you look at countries in very different situations, Nigeria has been an oil economy for many, many years. It's the mainstay of its budget, but if demand for oil is peaking now, by the time we get to the middle of the 2030s, what's going to happen to Nigeria's budget if it's got less and less money coming in? So how do they transition? How do you transition if you're Suriname or Guyana, where you've got massive new oil finds offshore, and you want to be able to exploit some of that for your own people, but you want to do it within the limits of net zero? And that's different from China, different from us, different from Russia. I think there may be an agreement here to have a process that goes beyond this COP to sort of look at that kind of thing as well.
Given the amount of hope there was a decade ago at the end of Paris, are you still hopeful that we'll still be able to make a difference? Are we doomed?
No, we're not doomed.
Just tell us, are we doomed?
We are not doomed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not doomed. So every increment of every degree matters. It isn't just a numbers game. It matters in people's lives, right? So I think there was the sugar high of Paris, right? We got an agreement, then we got to implement it. So we spent the last 10 years negotiating how we're going to do this. And now what the Brazilians are saying is, okay, the next 10 years is doubling down on what's working. So I think we have to really focus on the things that we know that work, the least number of most important things that work, and really sort of recommit to doing them. I mean, Xi Jinping said, we have to strive to do better. Absolutely. And that's even words to that effect are written into the Paris Agreement. So it gets a little bit more difficult to follow because it's every aspect of the economy. It's automotive, it's steel, it's cement, it's timber in construction. I mean, absolutely everything you can think. It's health, it's education. And I have to tell you that sitting here, cruising around, going from meeting to meeting to meeting, in every aspect of our global economy, somebody somewhere is making extraordinary progress. And so it's a question of positive deviance. Why don't we do what they did, right? We don't need to set a new goal. Let's just copy what they did if we can, and then spread that success around the world. So this is the right fight. This is the right forum, even though it's complicated and messy and difficult to report on. And if we don't all work together on this, then really, why, as political leaders and as industry leaders and civil society leaders, why are we here?
That was Rachel Kyte, UK Special Representative for Climate. The producers today were Harry Stott and Olivia Case. The executive producers were Taryn Siegel and Kate Lamble. Sound design was by David Crackles, and theme composition was by Mal Lassetto. If you can, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.